Good morning, everybody.
Hello.
This is July 20th, episode 63, and we're
Hey, July 20th, 2020. That's a good day to come back.
yeah,
2020.
yeah, and I would say we have 2020 vision, but we don't. But our hindsight is 2020.
There we go.
There we go.
Well, good morning, Kathleen. Yes, we hope our legion of fans will return after a 2 week break, during which time everybody could forget that we exist.
Yeah, it's nice being
Um,
off grid for that time, just so we can the hunger for our wisdom and truth could grow
that's
amongst
right.
those huddled in darkness, longing for our glory.
Actually, during this time, I got a great I got a great note from Anna Phelan, a friend of ours, who said how much she's loving these, and she lines up a bunch of them. She does a lot of cleaning, and she said she lines up a bunch of them and listens to them while she cleans, and she's really appreciative of it. So
That's nice to hear.
thanks for that. Yeah, hey Susan, thank you. Yeah, so we thought we would start off this day by reviewing all the things
All the
because
things. Well,
you
some of
know
the things, because
some
there's
of
too
the
much for too much
there's
all.
there's too many things.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's weird though. Like, because remember back when maybe this is just nostalgia that's corrupting my memory, but remember back when 2 weeks worth of happenings wasn't still that much of stuff. Not, I mean, you could go 2 weeks without
Yeah,
having a major news thing.
yeah, I actually don't remember that.
I mean, I have a vague sense, like of like, oh,
Right.
because there were horrible things happening, like we were murdering people around
Yeah.
the world, but you know we didn't
Yeah.
hear about
No,
it as much
I know.
because
I
but those
know.
things are still happening, and then we have this whole new level of crap that we can't ever avoid.
Right.
So this is life in a
Yeah.
pandemic.
Yeah. No, and what I thought you were going to say was remember when toilet paper was the big problem.
People, yeah, days and days of commentary about what this reveals about human nature that scared people grab things that they're worried about running out of,
Right. Yeah.
and then likening
I,
it to the narcissism of an entire generation, the nature of late stage consumer capitalism, precarity,
yeah,
all kinds of
I
just
know.
intellectual gold was mined from those 2-ply
Yeah,
squares.
yeah. I wish toilet paper was our problem.
No.
Anyway, maybe you could throw up that picture to show what our real problem is
Yeah,
right
just
now.
well, one of them.
Yeah,
Just
one of them.
just to kind of give a sense of like, yeah, I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
a statistician, but I mean, it looks like this one seems to be getting worse.
Right.
It's the further right you go, it's spikier.
Yep. So this is a graph of daily cases in the United States since this started. Yeah, and right, you don't have to be a statistician to know that that's not a good graph. It's not a good graph. And so, in the time that we've been gone, and the last couple weeks, that's what's been happening. And as of yesterday, just to sort of orient ourselves a little bit, uh, there are 39 major hospitals in Florida that now have 0 ICU beds. 5 of those are in Dade, Miami-Dade, Broward County area. Arizona, uh, similar kind of situation there. A lot of the hospitals full up. Los Angeles County, things are not looking good at all. Many states across the South are hitting record numbers of cases every day, hospitalizations. For a while, the conservatives were really excited because the death rate was low. right? Like filling up your ICU, I guess isn't bad. I guess that's okay.
It's good for business.
It's good for business. But now, of course, the death rate is also climbing, and we're once again approaching almost 1,000 deaths a day nationally.
Well, it's not funny. The strange thing to me is how many people I still encounter who, at one point, I thought were fairly intelligent and thoughtful, who are using terms like plandemic. There's the right wing versions of this, of course, but then there's also like that sort of that overlap, that Venn diagram of like libertarian and hippie who both don't believe in vaccines, like that kind of crew. And it's disturbing because like it's just a reminder of how much perception shapes our experience of reality. Like it doesn't matter unless you die. It's like I've also seen these sort of like aha gotcha memes about people who have like one day were at a party where they're not wearing a mask saying this is a bunch of libtard foolishness, and then a week later there's a picture of their funeral brochure and they're like and then people are like gotcha. Like, oh god, I want to live in a different world where this is every level of that is frustrating.
I know.
This is the world we live in where it doesn't matter what happens. That's been the most disturbing thing to me, like not just the bad things that happen, but how people do or don't respond to those bad things.
No, somebody was telling me yesterday, there was some one of these COVID parties, and then this young person gets COVID from the COVID parties, and right before he dies, he does some interview where he's like, well, I guess that was a mistake. And then he died. It's just, I laugh because it's kind of like what, at this point, like what else can you do? And, and then, and then even, even looking at some of these other country statistics, and you still have these people that are like, well, we don't have a problem here, or we don't know what to do, or we're in a very dissociated kind of state. And so
a couple comments coming in.
Yep.
So this is comforting. Thank you, Susan. It's starting to look like 45 wants us to die, right? Yeah. Well, definitely. I think he's always been comfortable with a certain number of people dying, and maybe his category of who gets to die is growing. But it feels like there's willfulness here.
Yeah. Well, it does, except this is the interesting thing about extreme narcissism. It's not that he wants us to die. It's that it just simply doesn't matter. Right. And so, again, like, he goes on news shows yesterday and just says, I'm going to be right. One day I'm going to be right. I mean, that's all he cares about. And so, so a bunch of people die, whatever. It's not going to be him. And just doesn't make any difference.
Mm-hmm. Kathleen writes, in Kansas City, Missouri, there has been a sharp increase of people being shot. My daughter was grazed by a bullet in the clinic where she works. I have heard that the FBI is getting called in. Something needs to be done, but I don't want this to be a Portland.
I'm very sorry about that about your daughter. So this is a whole other topic that we talked about getting into.
And they're related.
Certainly, what?
And they're interrelated in a sad, disturbing way.
So there has been a sharp increase in gun violence in many cities across the country. It's certainly true in our city of Minneapolis, but has been true a lot of other places.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course you have the quote law and order response to this, including federal involvement in that, and again, one of the things to me that is very sad is that although certainly one of the big issues is the accessibility of firearms in this country. The other really big issue that a lot of people don't want to talk about is the fact that, all these folks don't have anything to do, right? I mean, they don't have work, they don't have jobs. A friend of mine just posted an article that before the pandemic, 45% of young Black men in Chicago could not get a job. And I'm sure now it's worse. A friend of ours in Minneapolis posted a story the other day of this guy that got robbed at gunpoint and was actually able to sort of talk his way out of it and ended up giving these kids $100. And these were little kids who said, my mom is sick and I don't know what else to do. Right. Mm-hmm. So they, go rob somebody. I mean, the economic devastation behind all of this is massive. And, it's quite likely will only get worse.
Thanks for the pick-me-up. But
anytime.
And this is the thing about the violence and then the federal response, and that is disconcerting. Whenever things get shitty, our collective desire for someone to blame grows. And so the way I see that manifesting is, of course, liberals and progressives and even some radicals tend to blame Trump for everything, as though all of this stuff would have never happened if we had a different president. Right. Rather than things probably would have been better if we had President Clinton part 2, but it would have been more along the same lines. Like, this is part of the fabric of our society. So we like to blame Trump on one hand, but then on the other side, it's like all this sort of that, I'm going to go back to Antifa, all this sort of like, this is playing into this narrative that Antifa and leftist forces are responsible for the problems in our society, and that really, yes, we need to tweak law enforcement, but they're here to save the day. That narrative is growing again, and it keeps coming back up. And that when people start thinking that way, and they see it, and I saw this, I was trolling different, not trolling in the bad internet sense, but just kind of fishing around, I guess, different social media groups for Catholic workers. So you'd expect Catholic workers to be progressive, but a lot of Catholic workers in these Facebook groups are really hyper-traditionalist Catholics who have a fascist-y kind of side to them. And a lot of these folks who are pacifists were saying, look, you're doing this sort of criminal, animalistic behavior like these protesters in Portland do. Of course the feds are going to come in unmarked vehicles and scoop you up. You have it coming. Like, there's that kind of narrative continues to grow. And that sets a really bad precedent. As we were talking about before we started talking live, you were talking about, like, well, none of this is new. And look, of course we've seen these sorts of things before, which is why we know which direction it could go, and it could get worse. So I'm pessimistic about, unless we can figure out how to change the story better, I think we're kind of going to see things getting worse before they get better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can circle back to that. Sirius has a good comment here.
There's a lot of work on co-spirituality and cultural relational attachments and how that affects what narrative and conspiracy theory one latches onto. If you could point out like some directions to look for that, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Especially in light of this. It does feel cult-like, these responses to the pandemic.
Yeah,
for sure.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Gus.
Even crazier than Trump has to be Bolsonaro in Brazil, who caught COVID and is taking his mask off near others. He's downplaying it even after he's got it. Totally. I kind of expected that unless he died, it would be played off as no big deal. Not that I was longing for his death, but I think his death could have been a public good. if I can be
Yeah,
political.
absolutely. I mean, I've been, when I heard that he got it, I was like, oh man,
Unless he dies, it's going to get worse.
yeah, it's going to get worse. And yeah, and I think that, certainly if you look at him, if you look at a number of other leaders around the world, this fits in with the kind of right-wing fascist type approach to life, um, and to government and society. And yeah, and there is a total inhumanity to all of this, and it really is about saving my in group, whatever that in group happens to be. And Mark, as you're saying, there's always the out groups that we've got to blame everything on, and yeah, and that becomes a real difficult problem. Well, Adam's
Oh my
15
gosh.
minutes early.
I love that we just kind of dump on Adam for Adam has clearly commented before the end, but I like this idea that he's always the last minute commenter.
Yes.
And I'm going to keep pushing that. Adam writes, jumping back a second, I think it's dangerously naive to think that Trump doesn't want people to die. Okay. It's clear that he has an interest in pain and death in communities of color, particularly. It not only benefits a white supremacist worldview, but it also softens the nation for even more power grabbing politically and economically. I think it's a fair point. I think if there's benefit to people dying, he's going to consider it without really too much anxiety about it. And so I think that's true. I think that the white supremacist piece of it is, I think he generally has avoided white people dying but I think he's more comfortable with that. That's why he's pushing. I think part of the reason he's pushing the Antifa thing is like, okay, Antifa isn't all just white people, but collectively in our imagination it is. And so if you can create new criminal classes of white people, it justifies violence against white people, which is why liberals are anxious about Trump, is that the violence that we generally as a society have done to other people, Trump is maybe bringing to more white people. I think that's why white people tend to get anxious about things.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I think that I mean, Trump is just part of a very large cadre of of folks that are trying to grab political and economic power, as you say at the end there, and yeah, I think that my guess is that many of those other folks are much more actively malevolent. I think Trump doesn't mind if people die. I think Trump's main focus is, his power, his aggrandizement, and then, of course, by extension, the white supremacist aggrandizement. Severe narcissists, it's amazing how much they don't think about other people in any way at all. So people are just sort of objects to them. They're not really people. And so, that's what I mean by wanting. Wants and desires are all focused towards the self. And so, maybe this is sort of hair splitting and doesn't really matter, but the bottom line point of the power grabbing politically and economically, that is absolutely at the center of it.
Mm-hmm. And whether he's looking after reasons to kill people, or if he's just willing to kill people in order to get to his goals, it
just doesn't matter.
Either one's going to end up with death when you objectify people and are willing to use them for your own gain at that scale. Susan writes, Boris Johnson had a different response. It scared him straight. It's amazing. I remember before the pandemic, I heard more news about England and the UK. Now it's hard to even hear news about anything besides pandemic, and then things that fall under the category of protests, cancel culture, anything that has to do with the current culture war du jour. But I miss the days when I'd get to hear little updates about Boris Johnson and Brett.
Boris. Yeah, I know. All right, so Kathleen's got an example of,
The council chair of one of my churches refuses to wear a mask. Now his entire family, in his words, has the crud. He is still in denial. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah, it's just
What is it going
amazing.
to take? Oof. Heather writes, revisited the seventh seal. We need to get better at playing chess with death for the sake of the young. I'm assuming that's the Ingmar Bergman film. I remember being introduced to that film in my 20s and felt like I feel like I was supposed to really like it because it was an important art film. But it actually took me watching Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, which is satirized as part of that, for me to begin to grow in my appreciation of that film.
There we go.
Beth writes, yes, in Brazil, the current situation actually fits the stated goal of assimilating or ending the existence of indigenous people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no hospitals in the Amazon jungle. No.
No, this is the thing. So these folks like Bolsonaro, these authoritarian figures who have strong agendas, they're willing to use whatever is at hand or develops towards that agenda, even if it causes death. And it's frightening how much we can like I think most people, even if they think of themselves as left wing, are able to be manipulated easily by figures like this because they're just, when you see the world as as objects and you have a large apparatus at hand, you're just going to be able to outmaneuver other people because you're not going to get cut. There's a cold calculation in that way of seeing the world. Adam writes, that makes sense to me. He's a tool for those more nefarious, calculated agendas.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think, we've seen this with a lot of the GOP presidents over the last 30, 40 years, right? I mean, I remember talking with people and saying the exact same thing about Ronald Reagan. He was just sort of a great front man for all these much more intelligent right wingers. Obviously, W was pretty much completely run by Dick Cheney and that crowd. I mean, this has really been, I think, in many ways, a pretty intentional strategy of the GOP is to kind of get these either charismatic or whatever kinds of folks out there in front of people that are great front folks for the agenda, the people behind the scenes. Yeah. Oh, Kathleen's reading the book.
Oh, yeah. Kathleen's reading that nonviolent stuff will get you killed.
Yeah.
I appreciate your recommendation for that a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Great.
Good old Dan. Like, you're gonna have to come up with another book suggestion for this week. That's your assignment, Dan.
Okay.
And then I'll monitor the before, during, and after of the Amazon sales rank. Karen writes, the total inhumanity is stunning. Schools, universities reopening don't seem to care about student lives. Betsy DeVos is just fine with more than 15,000 children dying when public schools reopen. I have a friend who teaches at a university and is being required to teach in-person classes. It's insane. How are these people making decisions?
Yeah.
Badly.
Yeah. So that's a whole other topic. And I think we should probably do something on that this week as an individual standalone thing. This school thing, it's completely insane. And I think we have to state very, very clearly that without the pandemic being controlled in the wider society, opening up schools safely is impossible.
That's right.
Like, just period, full stop, impossible. All these things. And again, it's fascinating how we kind of, you start to buy into this fake reality, right? Of talking, well, we're thinking about plans and we're, trying to come up with different permutations. And I'm sorry, like, it is impossible. The notion that you're going to get kindergartners to socially distance, not hug their teachers. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who's a teacher. He's like, half the elementary schools, they'll be using their masks, elementary schoolers, they'll be using their masks as slingshots. Think about a high school hallway. You're going to tell all these teenagers, most of whose parents aren't doing any of this stuff, like, oh yeah, behave, socially distance. It is impossible. It
Even
is
if it were
absolutely impossible, period.
even if it were somehow possible, it would take like lots of intensive traumatizing. So to me, it's just like those
Yeah.
movies like Bird Box, or the one about this where everything was silent. If you make sound, the aliens, like, I don't know if it's what it's
Right,
called.
right, right.
The
Yeah.
Quiet Place.
Quiet,
It's
the
like you
quiet.
teach these children, like, wear the blind. If you take the blindfolds off, they'll kill you. Like, that's what it is. Like, wear the mask, don't touch each other, or you could die of the COVID. And so you have
Yeah,
to have these. The only way you can control a bunch of kids like that is through is generally through fear. Like,
yeah.
that's the only reason they're going to feel any sort of anxiety about not touching other kids or wearing cloth over their face.
Yeah.
It's just I'm kind of angry about it because like it's really inconvenient to me and like problematic to have school not working, and like I'm better off than a lot of parents. I have much more flexibility and freedom, even though it's kind of hard for us. So many families are gonna suffer, and like so I get the desire to go back to school, and the reason we can't is because of failure of leadership and social failure,
No.
and kids are gonna suffer now one way or the
Yeah,
other.
and so like one of the things, and obviously organizing this in America would probably be impossible, but I was just saying yesterday, we need to have just a general school strike, right? Because that's how schools get their money. And, if we had a strike where it's like, no, I'm not, and, no kid in America is going to enroll, right? We're not going to go to school. We're not going to enroll online. All the schools' budgets would completely crash. And what we're advocating for is for our government to take care of the pandemic, because that's the only way that it's going to work. Schools are not isolated little islands, right? Anyway, I could go on about this. I'm really pissed about
It's just, it's yeah. Uh,
it.
Edward writes, this points a particularly scary scenario for climate unless there's some kind of major shift politically and in consciousness. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the big issues in the background. Like it should be forefront, and
Mhm.
and our ecological devastation was more forefront before the pandemic, and it's all tied together, but it's hard to even talk about what needs to
Yeah.
happen for that because of this. And this crisis is, again, the right wing and the people with money and power are much better organized, and so they're exploiting this economically. Still, like the wealth of the wealthiest grows, uh,
Right.
and so they're using this. Like, it's like we've heard with Trump using distraction in order to like get rid of EPA standards. This is just all, yeah. For a month or so, we had nicer air because people were driving less, but that was just a blip in the shit radar.
Right.
Jim writes, did you happen to see the no maskers protest in the panhandle of Idaho? I wonder if there's a correlation to some degree of hotspots and where known hate groups are embedded.
Yeah, I mean, right now that would be the GOP. So because the hotspots are massive now, and they're pretty much all in red states. But yeah, you do get these. Yeah, I did see that particular one, and this is happening all over, right? These COVID parties. There was the Utah thing where all these people showed up at this county commissioner meeting, with no masks in this tiny room and just all started screaming. And again, particularly in small places, it's fine until it's not fine.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you've got 1,000 cases.
It happens quick.
Yeah, happens very, very quick.
Yeah.
So we are coming to the end of the time, and I do want to say something about the sort of this is negative and depressing and sad,
Well, of course it is because
which it is, and so to me there's kind of a two-pronged approach. And I don't think I mentioned it here, but I did post it on Facebook, this incredible quote from Catherine of Siena from the 14th century, talking about really exactly the same thing in her day and age. So on the one hand, the spiritual life demands that we have a very clear-eyed understanding of what is really going on. Like we just stop with the denial and the bullshit and the dissociation. But then on the other hand, we are really called to engage deeply with one of the few things we can control, which is our spiritual life. And to do that with others who are similarly trying to wake up. And we don't do that with the hope that we're going to fix this. I mean, those of us who are on here talking now, we cannot fix this. The best thing that we can do is sort of duck and cover and hope for the best. But what we can do is begin to engage with the communities that we are part of for trying to do something different in whatever limited way we can. Mm-hmm. And that is incredibly important. And that is really valuable work. And a lot of people are trying to do that. And that's, where the sort of hope is coming from. But we can't engage that hope with some sort of naive sort of foolishness. Yeah.
Should we try to crack through these last comments?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's see. Ceres writes, because of the GOP strategy, not just the increased terror under our noses, but also a lot of centralists and radicals doing rebranding of these frontmen and Darth Cheneys. Yes, it's not just the GOP aren't the only nefarious actors or groups that are contributing to these problems.
I mean, when my liberal friends start saying that George W., one of the biggest war criminals in history, is a nice guy, it just makes my blood boil.
Mm-hmm. Susan writes, if my children were school age and I had to work away from home, I would be out of my mind with anxiety right now. So sad. It's really hard. It's a really hard situation. Bobby writes, school administrators refuse to even come together for a meeting to plan the school year.
Yeah, there have been a number of these examples of, groups in power meeting at a distance because it's not safe to tell other people that it's safe to meet together. Right. The Wisconsin Supreme Court did that about voting. School boards are doing that about opening schools. The level of hypocrisy and obvious insanity is just remarkable.
Gus writes, and yet, even after they acknowledge these problems with schools, the pediatric professional associations have said they support it, which is bonkers. I don't understand how that can work.
Yeah, no, it is. It is, and I think part of it is people are, there is, I mean, this is another level that sets up is sort of this level of almost kind of resigned despair, right? Where you just say, okay, well, we're in the midst of this insanity. And so can we just be slightly less insane? And that maybe feels somehow better. But it's not better. That's not better at all.
A couple of comments here from Adam. Pushing this correlating point again. It's not a failure of our leadership. Pain and death is the plan. We're being dishonest or deluded at best when we say these people are being dumb or ineffective leaders. I do think there's some ineffective leadership within the mix of like city councils, Congress people. But yeah, I think that's a good point. Like maybe it's a little semantic. I see intentional hurting of people as a type of failure, but you're right. This isn't like an anomaly or that our system is just breaking down. This is the way the system was built to function. And there is some, it's easily exploited by powerful people for their gain. And there are also still in the midst of it, some really inept leaders that find their way through.
I mean, this is all, and, we've mentioned climate, the school thing, the death cult, the pandemic response. I mean, this is all the logical endpoint of rampant global capitalism. I mean, it's the logical endpoint of this.
People just keep these things. This isn't like
right.
So people.
It's not a surprise.
Know that this is where things could head, and a lot of us are talking about where things could continue to head and where they're going to go. It's funny to me, like just to talk about the negativity for a second. When you see all this stuff happening, you get accused of being negative. But there's a weird nihilism when it comes to being a moderate. Like Oh, the best we can do is make it a little less shitty for me right now. Like, that is so pessimistic and nihilistic. Here I am, the anarchist, saying we need to fight. That's actually hopeful. Like, come on now. We need to stop blaming people who are picking up the negative things for being negative themselves, because that it happens all the time. It's a type of gaslighting. And I know a lot of you out there are often made to feel bad by friends and family because you're seeing these horrible things and you're drawn alert to it. It's not, and they want to say you're the one being negative. Don't buy it.
No, don't buy it.
Thanks for walking through the negative, depressing, and sad. It's really important to finding a way through and moving with any genuine hope in our hearts.
You're welcome.
Gotta work,
Thank you for walking with us.
Yeah. And last final comment from Adam. At least it's part of the plan, even if it's improvised as a means to an end, as you explained earlier. Yeah, this is one of the hopes. If this is something that's happening because maybe not every step of the way, like it's got its own inertia, but this is planned. This is something that you could predict could happen. If that's true, then there's ways to undo it. It's not inevitable that we end up in a giant steaming pile of pandemic fascism. Like, it doesn't have to be that way. We can do something about it, but we have to be real about what's in front of us if we're going to do that.
Yeah, and what our range of action and influence actually is, which sadly is a lot smaller than we would like it to be.
Sure, that's true.
Oh, all right. Well, this is so great. This is very hopeful to me, to come on here and to see all of our pals. And so thank you very much for listening, and we will be back tomorrow.
I am actually not going to be able to be back tomorrow.
Oh, Wednesday. So we won't be back tomorrow.
So this is a teaser trailer
for Wednesday.
Wednesday's when magic really happens, everybody. If you like,
this was magical. I reject that.
Be hybrid. I'm trying to build up expectations to thundering levels, Dan.
There we go. All right. See you on Wednesday. Bye.
Bye.